Everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Charlene Seidel. I'm Executive Vice President of the Leash Tag Foundation, and I also serve as the chair of Impact Cubed. Um, as I think most of you know, we have been involved in Jerusalem and in grassroots social change for about a decade in Israel. And in the early days of this crisis, after the terrible massacre on October the 7th, we observed a phenomena that at the time wasn't being talked about that much in the news, which was this incredible and immediate response of civilians and from many, many sectors, grassroots volunteer efforts that started to organize immediately following in fact, on October 7th, there started to coalesce every kind of effort that you can think of, whether it was feeding people, which is going to be a focus today, whether it was collecting clothes, arranging housing for evacuees, going down to the south and trying to rescue people. There have been many, many elements and incredible stories around the civilian response. It's almost like a draft, almost like there was a civilian draft. And in fact, at the briefing last week, I reported that even amidst immense distrust right now in Israel to the government, by Israelis to the government, 96% of Israelis in a recent poll, 96% stated that they trust and they have faith and they are buoyed by the grassroots efforts, which is quite amazing. First of all, that 96% of Israelis can agree on anything. And even that there is the ability to feel hopeful in this time of great crisis, of great despair and great desperation. And I think it really speaks to the nature of the Israeli society right now, how it's mobilizing to care for those in need. And so we launched in the early days our Israel Emergency Grassroots Initiative to give flexible funds to grassroots leaders and volunteers who to be able to address changing needs on the ground. I wanted to just share that we are now a little bit over a month into the massacre, after the massacre, and we're in the midst, of course, of a war. And in our conversations with people on the ground, and you might hear this today, it seems like there is sort of a routine emergency. I'm not quite sure if that's the way, but like an emergency routine that's been established. People are desperate to return to some sense of normality. So many, many, many thousands and thousands, of course, are mourning loved ones. We still have 240 plus hostages in Gaza, which is, they need to be on our minds every minute of every day. And there's great efforts that are being made that we've talked about in prior sessions in order to raise the attention of the hostages situation and demand their release in the world. And at the same time, there's thousands of families whose husbands, sons, brothers, family members, spouses are deployed and are in reserve. So you have these like sudden single parent families. So much of life, what I'm trying to say, is not back in normality. It's very much not a routine. It's not a normality, but there's this will that's part of this desire to be resilient that is trying to go back into a routine. And so for our next few briefings, we're going to be focusing also on those elements in the midst of a routine emergency phase. Some of the major needs that have come that I've been hearing about this week that we'll be briefing on in the future are integrating more, and today a little bit, integrating more into the neighborhoods. How are the evacuees that are maybe like moving from their temporary residences and temporary hotels and resettling temporarily in neighborhoods, how are they being cared for and served? The trauma needs around the first responders are a major need that is starting to emerge. Of course, there's a collective trauma, but we're seeing very, very emergent trauma needs. We're in a phase as part of this routine emergency of some volunteer burnout. As much as, there was this energy and adrenaline in the first few weeks for volunteers, and as much as those volunteer efforts are continuing, one of our big priorities in the Israel Emergency Grassroots Initiative is going to be in the next few weeks to kind of address how do we navigate honoring volunteers and continuing to uplift them for their time and maybe support them for their time amidst rising unemployment and amidst a need to go back to some kind of, routine. And so that's going to be an issue. And then and a couple other issues that are starting to emerge around women's violence. That's going to be the subject of a future briefing, especially with increased number of guns that are circulating in the communities. We're seeing increased domestic violence and increased need to focus on that. We also know that assaults against women and violence against women and brutality against women were a piece of what the worst of the brutality of the massacre carried out. Rehab needs. Next week's briefing, we're going to have a guest who runs one of the major rehab hospitals in Israel to talk about what are the healthcare and the rehab needs, because that's really becoming needed for the many who were wounded, both in the IDF and also in the civilian population, and starting to think about some multi-sector reconstruction projects. There was a big initiative that was announced this week by the First Lady, by Michal Herzog, who actually used to work in the philanthropy world, so some of us know. She's going to be chairing like a multi-sector, long-term reconstruction for the South. And is looking to bring in multiple sectors into that. Of course, government, which we talked about last week, has been somewhat MIA, but also the business community and the private sector, and very much the philanthropy and the nonprofit sector. So we're going to have one of the focuses of our upcoming briefings is going to be about that. Today, I want to dive into and deep dive into the subject of food. Food has been an emergent issue that is becoming more of a pressing need. It was an issue in the earliest hours. As I mentioned, some of the earliest grassroots projects actually dealt with how do we get food to soldiers that are being deployed? How do we get food to people that now no longer have homes or kitchens? And our guests today are going to talk more about that and their amazing efforts. There's also three kind of circumstances that are converging into one crisis that is going to be more in the mid and long term also. First of all, many, over half of the farms in Israel are in the south, are in the region that is either no longer accessible at all, or very, very hard to access, or has been razed. So there's just no possibility of production in a lot of the farm land in Israel right now. That's combined with a shortage of labor, because much of that farm labor were Thai workers, Palestinian workers, and others who are not able to work the farms anymore. There is Israel's in a clear economic crisis right now. The cost of food is rising. Many people are becoming unemployed, as I mentioned. And so that is also converging and adding to this mix around food and farming. And then there's an increased need of populations like soldiers and evacuees and others who suddenly have this need for food, combined with the needs of the already vulnerable populations like seniors and others who have deep food needs. So we're going to try to, in the next 40 minutes, just delve into both the short, what was done in the immediate days following the crisis following the massacre regarding food, and how our guests see that going forward. So I want to briefly introduce very, very briefly some friends and some of the greatest grassroots leaders, most creative thinkers, and social entrepreneurs that I know, and I know a lot of great people in Israel. So these are three of really the best from different sectors and different realms of the food and farming. Chef Hidai Ofaim is an entrepreneur. As many of us, an entrepreneur, a thinker, a writer, a chef, a farmer. I'll let him maybe speak more to that. Some of us who are on maybe the community mission or other trips might have eaten at one of his amazing farm-to-table restaurants in Israel. Yoni Yafet Reif is the founder of Kaima Farm, which is a very innovative program that takes youth at risk and deploys a unique educational method right on the farm while growing many different kinds of vegetables. And so Yoni will talk a little bit more about that. And Daniela Seltzer, who is the co-founder of Jerusalem Food Rescuers, that is a multiple bottom line organization that's looking at food waste, food reuse, food access, and the power of food to bring people together. I think I basically described that. And she's also is with us to talk about some really interesting food rescue efforts. So I want to start short term. Each of your projects actually jumped in different ways in those very early hours to help provide food. October 7th, October 8th, October 9th, you were already at work at this. So Hidai, maybe we'll start with you. If you can share a little bit about how your restaurant chain jumped in and also catalyzed volunteers.
Thank you, Charlene, and what is it? Good afternoon, everybody, right? Over there.
Good morning.
Good morning, right. On Peaceful Days, our farm is a model farm for sustainable agriculture. We literally grow everything from seed to table, livestock, fruit trees, vegetables. We have factories and plants to process the food. We sell it in our farm stores and serve it in our farm cafes. And that's in Peaceful Days. So we employ about 300 workers, Israeli workers, only Israeli workers. We were not affected by the leaving of Thai workers, for example. But we were affected by the fact that many of us were called and have been drafted on reserves on October 7th and 8th. On October 7th, which was a Saturday, our place keep kosher, so they were closed. But the minute we understood what's going on, we just jumped into one of our main kitchens and we started taking everything out and sending it from ear to mouth. We got messages from our friends who got drafted and they asked for food, because when you draft such a large amount of people, the first thing that happens is you also draft the cooks, you also draft the logistics people, you also draft, so nothing is in place yet. And we thought it's going to be a day or two until everything settles. The next day, which was a Sunday, we just called a few of our team members, of our staff, and we started preparing food with whatever we had in our warehouses, which is quite a lot because we are a farm. So we had all of the vegetables and all the cheese products and eggs and what's not. And we have a big bakery, a pastry shop. And the more we sent, we saw that the demand is even bigger. Charlene, you mentioned that the government is MIA, which is still the case in so many aspects. For many of us, this was not a surprise in any way. After 15 years of decay and corruption of the current government, it was obvious that the wrong people are in the wrong positions, minding the wrong priorities. And this is why this grassroots civilian draft, as you called it, was so sincere and so strong. On the third day, October 9th, we already had 40 volunteers show up in the morning, and we understood that this is not going to be enough. Today, our volunteer community is a group of 1,200 people. This is a month later, which we organize in WhatsApp groups. Those who volunteer in our efforts in our kitchens, help there. Those who can't help there go, and in the first days they were cleaning and mending bomb shelters of the elderly of the Haredi community in Jerusalem. They are volunteering in agriculture, which we'll talk about later, etc. In the past 31 days, we've been serving between 5,000 and 10,000 meals per day. It started with soldiers, with Magen David Adom volunteers, with police, etc., and later on moved to the evacuees, to the families of the kidnapped and the murdered. We're sending food to the protest camp in Jerusalem of the families of the dead and the kidnapped. And what's interesting is that and of course we have donated whatever our ability was at the beginning, and of course the infrastructure and the people and the workers, but so many other people and forces joined in, from volunteers to donors to people donating money to people donating eggs from their egg farm. So everything in between. I do not see it stopping at this point. The demand is still very, very, very high. We do our best. It's very important to say that it's not only that we weren't the only ones, we were ones of so many others that have done the same. Our friends in the food business, I cannot think of one name in the food business that I know who did not join the effort dramatically. So in Tel Aviv, Ha'achim restaurant joined 115 restaurants in this effort. In Jerusalem, it's a joint effort. There's no ego. There's no logos on whatever we stand. It's just doing everything we can to send to the front, to send to the people in need. And it's that's what makes it so hopeful, right? The ability and the knowing that everybody is giving as much as they can without asking anything in return other than the day after. That will not be the same as the day before.
Thank you, Hidai. I was actually at your restaurant, and I should mention that, I mean, Hidai is very humble, but it is, Ofaim Farms is the leading farm to table chain in Israel, and the highest quality food. People rave about it from all over the world. And I was just at the restaurant at the cafe last week, and there were at least 20, probably more, volunteers making sandwiches to take to the different hotels in Jerusalem for the evacuees. And it was really incredible, actually, that 4 weeks after the massacre, this was still happening. Yoni, can you briefly describe Kaima's program model and how you pivoted in those earliest days and hours?
Yes, thank you, Charlene. A bit about Kaima. Kaima is today 4 farms in Israel that are in the same name of Kaima and are part of our network. And what we're doing is working with dropout kids at the age of 15 and 18. We're working together, growing vegetables and sending it to people that buy the boxes of vegetable, and that's part of how we manage to have a budget with the help of philanthropic and a bit of the welfare administration only for the last 3 years. When we started, I mean, Sunday after the war, the first thing that happened in the farm is that nobody was in the farm. 30 kids didn't came because they were not allowed to. And actually they wanted to came. They all called and asked and pleaded to came. They remembered some of them was in the Corona time. So they remembered this time, and they didn't want it to be again the same, that they cannot come to work. And then we have national service people that was shocked because a lot of their friends died in the Nova party that was there. And then from the adults, that we are 12 adults, only 4 came to the farm because most of them went to the military. So the first thing we had to do is to think, how can we save the farm before we even start about the South? Because we knew that, in agriculture, if you leave your land for few days, that's it. Everything you planted, everything you did, it's just going down. So we knew we have to do something. And I told my friends at the farm, go to work, and I promise you within an hour, you will see people here. And I just sent one message to one guy I know, and he started to send more messages. And actually, an hour later, we had more than 60 people in the farm volunteers. And that shows the solidarity of the Israeli people in crisis time, because it was amazing. I went down to the farm again. I saw all the 60 people. I knew they're going to stay with us for the whole time. They will never leave. And now we have to think about the South. What can we do with the South? And one of my friends, she owned a catering near Jerusalem. And she started Sunday to create, like he died, to create meals and to send it to the South. So first thing that we could do is send some vegetables to them. Actually, it was just small percentage of the vegetables that she got from so many people, and the food she got from so many people in order to create those meals and send them to the South. And then it took us a week to join to the effort and come ourselves to the catering and start work. And for us, it was also a saver, because we felt that we need to find something to do in order to help others. And at the same time, we couldn't bring the youth to the farm. And our youth, if they're not functioning even few days, they're starting to go back to the same problems they had before, with depression, anxiety, and with the war, it was much, it was a bigger crisis. So, and we were allowed to bring them to the catering, because there they have a bomb shelter. So all the youth started to come every morning to the catering to create food. And we started to send 1,000 meal every day. Until today, we're still doing it. But yesterday, the youth could come back to the farm because the government allowed it. So we switched between the volunteers and the farm, and they could go and help at the kitchen, and the kid could come back to the farm. I think that if we're also talking about the future,
maybe we should wait. Should we wait
we
for the
should-
future till the next part? Or
Okay.
okay.
Okay. So I'll wait
We're
for the next
still,
part.
we've got to just deal with the past first. Okay, thanks, Sony. So Daniela, as we look at the food system, we also know that like part of the issue is accessibility of supply, and a large portion of food we know is wasted. Jerusalem Food Rescuers, the organization you founded, kind of started to address that, in the earliest hours after October 7th. So if you could just share how you responded in the early days, and then we'll move to the next phase.
Sure. Thank you, Charlene, and good morning to all of you. It's funny here, it's 8:30 at night. Over there, it's 10 a.m., 10:30 a.m. So we founded the Jerusalem Food Rescuers 5 years ago, and our organization kind of molded into what it became during the Corona, during COVID. When we started to create a network of food rescue and food security that was primarily based on the surplus that we received from the wholesale market. I'm not sure if all of you know wholesale markets, but in every big city there is a wholesale market, and this is one of the main points where food comes to, and from there it continues on to restaurants, super small scale grocery stores and supermarkets and cafes and hospitals and caterings and whatnot. So in the wholesale market in Jerusalem, between 10 to 20 tons of food are thrown out every single day. I'm not talking about the war, I'm speaking about every day. So our organization works around creating a more just and sustainable urban food system in Jerusalem. We're very much focused on the urban scale in the city. We have both a project of food rescue. We have so far rescued 550 tons of primarily fresh produce from the wholesale market. We distribute all of that food through very hyper-localized community-based markets run by volunteers, and we also do educational programs and the catering business. And during the first week of the war, we went to the wholesale market. The first day, actually, this was the second day, Monday. We went to the wholesale market and we saw that it was almost completely empty. All of the workers usually come to the wholesale market. They come from near Hebron. They weren't allowed to come in. So when we came to the wholesale market, we saw that all of the business owners were the ones working on the forklifts and organizing everything in the wholesale market. We also saw that only a third of the amount of food that usually comes to the wholesale market has come. So there was actually a shortage of fresh produce that was coming into Jerusalem. I'm sure many of you saw in the newspaper, the supermarkets literally empty and in the shelves. And the prices were skyrocketing to around 150%. And it was very clear for us that we wanted to continue rescuing food and creating more food rescue opportunities. We expanded the amount of food that we rescued in the wholesale market. And at the same time, we started to collaborate with actually Afaim's, Hidai's restaurants, and also Louisa Catering, which is the catering that Yoni was mentioning, that they also collaborated to bring them also a surplus food so they can use it for their cooking. So we almost multiplied the amount of food that we rescued within this past month, from around 3 tons to around 6 tons of fresh produce. And at the same time, we were getting literally, I think, around 1,800 more requests for support. This was from women whose partners were drafted to the army. This was from people who were working hourly wages, cleaners, people working in supermarkets, drivers who were now not working at all, and people who were really, really anxious to leave their house, mainly elderly folks who just didn't want to be very far away from a place of a shelter in case there was a siren. So we were getting a lot more requests for fresh produce. And at the same time, some people were also telling us that they don't want to get prepared food. They also wanted to get fresh produce so that they can create their own meals according to their own cultural tastes. So we were trying to contact back all of the communities we were working with and ask how they were and see if there were other demands in terms of food, and check how they were doing. So many volunteers were coming. It was really, it was so heartwarming to see so much of Israeli society being interested in being part of volunteering. And I'm sure Yoni and Hidai would probably also say that we were all swamped with invitations of volunteers who wanted to be part, and there was more volunteers than opportunities to take part. So that was really heartwarming to see the amount of people who were interested to take part. The last thing we were trying to do is also try to map out food rescue opportunities within Jerusalem. So up until now, we were primarily focused on looking at the 8 to 10 tons of food that we can rescue from the wholesale market. And at this point, and in the upcoming weeks, we're also looking to work with volunteers in different neighborhoods and increase the amount of food we rescue, looking at bakeries and supermarkets, grocery stores, and the like. So this is what we've been primarily focusing on.
Really drawing, I think, on your local relationships with like also small businesses that are probably also struggling and trying to understand how to manage inventory there may be opportunities to rescue those kinds of products. Thanks, Daniela. So now we'll maybe have a chance to look a little bit longer term and looking at food supply and farming a bit longer term, especially given what I had said before about so many of the farms being in the South and these converging crises. Hidayah, you have a lot of experience as a farmer, as a restaurateur, as somebody that really understands the trends. Can you share what's happening with farming in general now in Israel and how you see that impacting the food supply and other food needs coming up in the coming months?
Of course. So to begin with, we need to say two things. One is that farming in Israel has been deteriorating throughout the years, in the past almost 40 years, as as a priority, it went lower and lower in the priorities of Israeli government and of the public sentiment as well, with the opening of importation of food, with the change in diet. People eat less salad and more processed food, as you know, as it is in most of the Western world. So the starting point was not great to begin with. Now, at the same time, agriculture in Israel has a mystical standpoint, meaning that, for example, the IDF is the Israeli Defense Force. When the name was decided, it was not the Israeli attack forces, it is not the Israeli army, it's the Israeli Defense Force, because its aim is to defend what is inside Israel. And inside Israel is culture, is education, is progress, and is agriculture. And agriculture really was and still is, in my eyes and in the eyes of many others, the most significant point in the returning of the Jewish people to his homeland. Without the ability to supply our own food, without the ability of the Jewish people to grow food to sustain itself, there is no, in my eyes, a context of us sitting here. We're not sitting here only for historical reasons, but mainly for future reasons. So what happens is that it's not only the farm in the south that have been affected or the ones surrounding Gaza. There are three major agricultural areas in Israel. The first is the one surrounding Gaza in a wide circle, let's say 25 kilometers surrounding Gaza. The other one is in the Arava Desert, which is the second largest agricultural area. And the third, which is super important, is the one up north, which has also been dramatically affected by the situation, as 28 villages and towns have been evacuated of their inhabitants due to the threat from Lebanon, from the Hezbollah, meaning that people cannot work some of the crops there as well. So 2 out of the 3 agricultural areas of Israel are now under siege. Number one. Number two, so security-wise, it's hard or almost impossible to work many of those areas. Secondly, the Israeli agricultural industry relies on foreign workers and on Palestinian workers. The foreign workers are mainly from Thailand. Almost 70% of them have left the country within the first week after the atrocities and the great tragedy that happened to them as well on October 7th, when many of them got murdered, killed, and kidnapped to Gaza. So many of them, in the recommendation of the government of Thailand, have left. Palestinians are not allowed in from the West Bank for security reasons, for different reasons, and that has left us farmers with no working hands, not a decrease of 10% or 20%, no working hands for many, many areas of the country. And this is the month of October and November are the month of harvesting in Israel. It's right? Sukkot is the holiday of harvest. This is when we harvest. This is when we harvest tomatoes. This is when we harvest apples. This is when we harvest everything. And what happened is that, again, through grassroots civilian organization, so many of the volunteers were directed towards the farm, which, unlike making sandwiches in my kitchen, is a much more a professional work, one that requires experience, one that requires knowledge, one that requires commitment, and one that requires shape. You need to be in shape to be working in the sun for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day. So on one hand, yes, many of the crops were saved. Many of the crops were in the last moment picked, and even right at the border of Gaza, Kibbutz Be'eri, which suffered over 100 casualties on October 7th, is still harvesting avocado right on the border of Gaza as we speak, right now, even at night. So this is happening on one hand. On the other hand, we don't have employees, we don't have workers to do the hard labor, not to pick up the tomatoes, but to plant, to work the really tough agricultural labor, which Charlene, I don't think maybe we'll refer to that later, but the whole notion of what's next and how is this going to affect, how is the crisis in agriculture, which is super present at this point in the media, in the social media, in the news, in the volunteering, how is this crisis going to grow us to a better place which once existed in Israel and is forgotten, and we'll discuss that a bit later.
Well, you did a teaser, so do you want to just keep going and discuss it now?
Sure.
Okay.
When you go on, when you study navigation in the army, the one thing they teach you again and again is that when you get lost, when you don't know where you are, you need to go to the last place you knew where you were and start over. This is what's happening to the Israeli country as we speak. We got lost in so many ways. Chaim Guri, the famous Israeli poet and publicist and writer, called it the culture of the circle. Israel was formed as a circular culture, which means that everybody sits around the campfire looking, aiming to the same idea, bringing whatever he brings with him, but we're all looking for the same idea or for the same goal. If you look at Israel of October 6th, nobody was looking at the same direction. Each of us was looking at another direction. You're all aware of the political instability that was in Israel in the past few years because so many of us looked at different directions. What happened with the war is that everybody shifted their view again to the center, to the communal goal of the existence of a Jewish state in the land of Israel. And when you look at that goal, you understand the basic necessities, the basic needs of having this really magnificent opportunity to live in our own homeland after 2,000 years. A big part of it is agriculture. That is exactly what my grandparents, who were pioneers and built a kibbutz 80 years ago, thought. These are not my words. These are their words. And this happened in Israel once. If you, I don't know the age of some of you who are with us here tonight, this morning, but I assume you remember the time of volunteers coming from North America and from all over the world to work in kibbutzim in Israel. You remember the stories of agriculture in the 50s and the 60s. And people understand today. I saw a social media post on Facebook a couple of days ago of a lady saying that she was volunteering in an onion field. And she had no idea of the amount of work and effort required to grow an onion and get it to the supermarket. Because she had to pick it out from the ground, clean it, take out the leaves, pack it, and all that. And she said, I had no idea that all of this is happening in my country. Now people have an idea. They understand the necessity. And I think moving forward that I hope, and I think I had a conversation about that with Yoni the other day. I think that the goal, the mission of our generation literally the mission of our generation. I'm not saying it as a farmer, I'm saying it as a father in Israel. Every or many young adults, when they finish high school, before they join the army to defend the country, they first need to work the land, to live in the land. And that is through volunteering and working in agriculture. We can no longer rely on 100% of foreign working in agriculture. We can no longer rely on being able to import food not in the season just because we feel like it, and at the same time breaking down the systems and the agricultural systems of so many businesses in Israel and etc. And people understand it today. And I really look forward for the day after to people taking charge and taking responsibility, understanding that what we put in our mouth does not begin in a supermarket. It begins with the people that are holding the borders, that are sitting up north, that are sitting in the Arava, that are sitting around Gaza. And without them and without what they do, there is no justification for us to keep this land.
Thank you, Hidayat. It's a very, very important vision. Daniela, you also are working on a vision for how food rescue is going to expand and pivot to meet these coming moments, these coming months. Can you share a little bit? You talked already about like sourcing from multiple small businesses and others. Can you share a little bit about how you see food rescue meeting that need?
Yeah, so I think one of the main things to think about is that when we think about the war, we are not only looking at the next few weeks or the next few months. We need to think about the next year and years to come, and how these past few weeks and the next unknown amount of time is going to affect the time that will come afterward, where many populations, especially the most vulnerable ones, will suffer from food insecurity. Already right now, around a fifth of Israel's population is to some extent food insecure. And some of you probably know 38% of Jerusalem is under the poverty line. So we really need to think about food security as organizations and NGOs working on this, and also on the municipal level. What we have been trying to do is triple the amount of food that we want to rescue, as I mentioned before, from the wholesale market and also from the city. There are so many food sources where we can rescue food from, and unlike many cities in the US where there has already an established urban food rescue system, like in New York, City Harvest, and in Boulder, Colorado, and many other cities in Israel, we don't have any urban food rescue program. We have Leket that does amazing work around working with farmers to rescue food from farms, but we don't have any urban food rescue program. So now we're trying to create a pilot program of this, hopefully with the municipality and with the Ministry of Agriculture and Environmental Affairs as well. And really, I've been, Charlene knows this, it's been driving me crazy that so much food has been bought to support evacuees and the army and people who are already coming from vulnerable communities, when there is so much food already in the city that we can rescue and use instead of having it go to landfills. So this is really something that we're hoping to expand. And I'll also say that one of the next steps that we see as critical is creating more collaborations between NGOs and the municipality, and also between, a lot already has been happening. And I think the, crisis, as Hidayat was saying, crisis brings people together and strengthens the communal resilience. And I think it's very important to continue strengthening these collaborations, and also collaborations with security. And I'll also say that one of the things that I was just mentioning this today in a National Food Security Forum is the importance of rescuing food from charity organizations that distribute food. I'll give you an example. In the wholesale market, there's another NGO that works there that receives tons of food from large food corporations and supermarkets and Leket, and they received 65 tons of tomatoes from Turkey. And the next day I saw 30 tons being thrown out in the garbage of the wholesale market. And I think so much food comes into the city, but we really need to create a smarter system of distributing all this food that comes in. So this is one of the main things we've been trying to work on and also fundraise for. We're trying to also to expand our efforts to move into a larger workspace, and with the help of Charlene and Lishtag and other amazing people to really be able to scale up our work even more.
Thank you, Daniela. Both like what Hidai was talking about, you know, being more self-sufficient in growing our food, and then being so mindful over what comes in and what gets thrown out. It's really part of a larger vision to help ameliorate this real crisis in food and farming. Yoni, can you just take a few minutes to reflect? And I know I had interrupted you before, so whatever you were gonna say before, hopefully you have planned. But you know, you're an educator, and you have a very unique sort of lens among the youth that you're working with, and your vision is you work side by side with the youth, so you really understand like what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Can you reflect? Hidai and Daniela both laid out certain interesting vision around food, farming, how you see that, and especially through the lens of the youth that you're working with.
So, you know, Charlene, we've been working, I mean, I know you for 11 years from the start, from the beginning. So, you know, we've been working with hundreds of youth over the years. And I can tell you that I would say 20-30% of them would like to work in agriculture, would like to, you know, to give their life to farming and agriculture, what they like. But the ecosystem in Israel of agriculture would not allow them. You need to have a lot of money in order to have land. It's very difficult to get into agriculture. And, you know, I hope and want to be optimistic that maybe as he die optimistic in the future, it will be it will be easier for them to take part in farming in Israel. But I think one of the important things that we've been saying, you know, we met for the last 5-6 years, we met many ministers of the agriculture. And because, you know, we had a lot and it's really hard to count them. But, you know, each time I met one of them, I told them the most important thing that you can do is bring the people of this land back to agriculture by let them, and even put money into it, join agriculture. And there's two ways to do it. One is to, and I think this is the most important thing, is to open and start farming everywhere in the country near cities, so that we will not waste food by moving them from part to part. Actually, in Israel, you can grow almost everywhere. I mean, the land allows it. Even in Jerusalem, with the harsh stones, we show that it's possible. So everywhere, near every city, near every kibbutz and every moshav and everywhere, we should have farming. And I would say that we need to allow people to join the effort of farming. So it doesn't have to be only dropouts. That's what we started 10 years ago. It could be, you know, our volunteers, most of them were 60 plus, and they said it was the most important thing they did for many years, not because they came to help. They said, thank you for allowing us being here, because it was amazing for us. And people with disabilities and people with PTSD. And I mean, if we'll get this country and those people who live here to join back to agriculture. And as Idai said, maybe a year before army, but I think that we can do it all the time, not through schools, because schools in Israel, you know, they'll bring the kids for one day, oh, nice, and we did it, and that's it. We're talking about something deeper than that. I think that can change all of us, not only because of food security, that is very important, especially we see it in those times, but also because being outside, touching the soil, we have to remember it, seeing the green is something really important for human beings wherever they are. So I think our goal for the next years is to take care of creating new farms all over Israel, very close to cities, very close to where people live. And I think the youth is, going back to your question, the youth that I know would really like to be part of it.
Thank you, Yoni. You know, hope is a really precious commodity now in Israel. It's a time of, in general, I guess, it's a time of a lot of despair and pain and fear. There's so much fear. What each of you are doing is really bringing, you know, so much hope. I was going to wrap with a little bit of a roundabout about what brings each of you hope, but I think you've really articulated that in some of your vision and some of your determination. I was going to share that what brings me hope, and I was reading an article about the difference between hope and optimism, and how optimism is a passive act, like, okay, we're optimistic, but you don't really do anything about it. And hope is an act of courage, and it's an act of imagination, and it's an active, like, you know, there are so many naysayers out there and so many reasons why, you know, everything is doomed. And yet to hope, that's like an active sense, that's taking action to do something positive and to change reality, which is a very, very brave and bold step. So I think that all of you who are doing so much to create hope really is creating hope for me. So I want to thank everybody for being on our call. I want to thank Daniela, Yoni, and Hidai for your amazing partnership and for being part of this. All of you are part of our Grassroots Response Initiative. You're all on the front lines of this incredible volunteer movement. So thank you so much. Thanks to everybody that joined. I really welcome feedback on these weekly calls. Sometimes they're just briefings from me. Sometimes we have guests and topics. And so your feedback is really, really important in every way. Next week, we're going to focus on healthcare right in Israel, and especially rehab needs, with a kind of an interview with the CEO of one of the major hospitals in Israel to give her perspective. So Laila Tov to our friends in Israel. Thank you for all you're doing to feed people, body, soul, mind, every way. Each of you are feeding us from all over. And good night, and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.